You ever notice that there is a kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with how much you slept? Hello, and welcome back to Rooted in the Seasons, where ancient wisdom meets modern life with a strong cup of tea and practical tools for real busy women. I'm Katya Patel, Ayurvedic diet and lifestyle educator, yoga teacher, and teacher mentor. Today, I want to talk about something that I think many women feel, but don't always connect the dots around. That tiredness that sits underneath the day, the one that sleep doesn't quite fix. And what yoga actually teaches us about where it comes from and what to do with it. So just stay here with me for a few moments. I want to start with something personal. Many people assume that yoga teachers float through their day in a state of permanent calm, that we don't get stressed, don't second guess ourselves, don't lie awake running through our to-do lists. I want to be honest with you, that's not the case. Not for me anyway. I get stressed about deadlines, about whether my work is good enough, about whether I am good enough. The comparing, the second guessing, the quiet drain that comes from following the thought down its pattern. I know that very well. And here's what I have noticed over years of observing myself. What tires me most is rarely what's actually on my plate. It's the narrative that runs alongside. You might recognize that yourself. It probably sounds something like, I don't know if anyone will read this. People might think I'm not qualified enough. Others doing this so much better. None of this is based on facts. And yet, every time it starts fresh, as certain and as urgent as if it had never been questioned before. And this is something I see again and again in the women I work with and in myself. The tiredness isn't coming from the workload. It's coming from this loop. Now, here's something important to say before I go any further. This is not a character flaw. It is not something you're doing wrong. And it is not a sign that you are weaker or more fragile than other people. Here's what is actually happening. Your nervous system is responding to something that feels threatening. Not something that is threatening, something that feels like it. And the brain quite often cannot tell the difference. For women in particular, this runs very deep. We are wired, genuinely, neurologically wired, to care about social connection, about how we are received, about whether we belong. And there's a reason for that. Historically, women raised the children. That required a strong social structure, the support of others, a place in a community. Being accepted wasn't just comfort, it was safe. That wiring doesn't switch off just because the context has changed. It is still running. And so when the narrative starts up, am I good enough? What will they think? Others are doing this better. Your nervous system is not malfunctioning. It's evolution. And once you understand that, something shifts. Because you stop fighting yourself and you start working with yourself instead. So how do we actually work with it? This is where yoga comes in. And I want to be clear about what I mean. Not the yoga of shapes and sequences, the yoga that teaches you to observe. A regular practice makes you familiar with yourself. First, the body, how it feels on a given morning, where it is holding tensions, what it needs. Then, gradually, the mind, the patterns that run in the back, the narratives that start up before you have even had your first cup of tea. Now, here's something important. Knowing the pattern doesn't make it stop. Minds still run in exactly the same way they always have, but when you can see a pattern for what it is, you have the choice. You can follow it all the way down the rabbit hole, or you can do something else. And as mentioned before, it is something I see in the women I work with. The moment they stop being surprised by the pattern, the moment they recognize it and name it, it loses some of its grip. Not all of it, but some. And this is enough to change what happens next. Yoga is rooted in the understanding of duality. The mind moves towards what it likes and away from what it dislikes. And that movement, that constant reaching and avoiding, generates most of our suffering. A regular practice gently works with that. You step on the mat on the mornings you don't want to. You stay with the breath when the mind wants to wander. The effects on the body are real and they are good, but they are the bonus. The actual work done through the body is always on the mind. And the most accessible place to start, the tool you always have with you, is your breath. We breathe all the time, which means we always have access to this. A few slow, conscious breaths shift the nervous system out of threat into something steadier. They move the focus from narrative to what is actually happening right now. Think about it this way. The narrative needs your attention to keep going. The moment you place your attention somewhere else, on a physical sensation of the breath, on the natural pause after the inhale, the exhale, on the gentle release of the exhale, the narrative loses its hold. Long enough, to break the loop. This is not a small thing. A regular practice does something similar over time. It doesn't have to be long. A short Surya Namaskar in the morning. 5 minutes sitting and checking in with what the day is going to bring. These small acts of returning to yourself, done consistently, keep the pattern slowly from taking over. Not because they silence the mind, because they give you a way back when it runs. Consistency matters more than intensity. Always. 5 minutes every day will do more than an hour once a week. Think of rhythm, not rules. I have worked with many women going through these loops day after day. And the single most effective tool was always the same thing. Not more information, not another technique to try, just one steady anchor. A single practice that gives you a way back to yourself before patterns take over. That's exactly what the Rest Isn't Enough live workshop is built around. Here, we look at the rhythm, the nervous system, and how one simple daily structure can change how the whole day feels. And we figure that out there and then in the live workshop. This podcast is part of a wider body of work. And when rest isn't enough is where we go deeper together. You find the link in the show notes. So let me bring this back to the essentials before we finish. The tiredness that sits underneath your day is often not about your workload. It's about the narrative running alongside it. That narrative is not a flaw, it's wiring. Deep evolutionary wiring that makes complete sense once you understand where it comes from. Yoga helps, not by silencing the mind, but by teaching you to recognize the pattern. And the breath is the most accessible place to start. Always available, always enough to break the loop. One steady anchor, consistent, not intense. That is what changes things. Before I finish, I want to leave you with this. The narrative will keep running. That is what the mind does. But you don't have to follow it all the way down. A breath, a few minutes on the mat, something small and consistent that brings you back. Practice does something the narrative never expects. It shows you again and again that you can. And over time, that changes everything. Not just how the day feels, but how you feel about yourself. And that is enough to make the difference. Thank you so much for listening to Rooted in the Season. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe or follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That way, new episodes land automatically for you. If you'd like more support between episodes, you can download my free guide, my 5 daily Ayurvedic shifts to feel like yourself again, and join my Sunday Read newsletter. You'll find all the links in the show notes. And if something in this episode resonated, I would genuinely love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Substack or send me an email. I always read and answer all of them. Until next time, stay rooted in the seasons. Bye-bye.